We were just sitting on the bus, until his shoulder rested against mine. I wasn't looking for anyone that morning. I wasn't even looking up. My headphones were in, the bus was too full, and all I could think about was how tired I was. It was one of those days when the sky feels heavy, when the city hums but you're somehow disconnected from it, like everyone else is part of some rhythm you can't quite fall into. I slid into the corner seat, pressed against the window, cold glass against my arm. The bus jolted forward. A sigh escaped me before I even knew it. Another day, another routine, and then he boarded. I didn't notice him at first. Not until the shuffle of people filled every last empty seat and he ended up next to me. He was tall, too tall for the cramped seats, his knees awkwardly angled, his coat brushing against my thigh. I glanced up, briefly. Brown hair, messy in a deliberate way. Handsome in the careless sort of way that makes you think he doesn't know it, or maybe he does and doesn't care. He didn't say a word. Neither did I. The bus roared. The world blurred past the windows. And for a while it was just silence. And then it happened. His shoulder leaned just slightly against mine. Could have been an accident. The way the bus jolted over potholes, the way people naturally shifted when the vehicle turned. But it lingered, not pressing hard, not claiming space, just there, warm, quiet, close. I froze. My breath caught in my throat, though I tried not to show it. It wasn't much, just a shoulder, just a fraction of weight leaning against me. But in that moment, it felt like everything. It's funny how the smallest touches can feel like whole conversations. I don't know if anyone else on that bus noticed, but to me it was like the world shifted. Like my chest opened in some way I hadn't expected. I told myself not to read into it. People lean on strangers all the time, don't they? He was probably tired, probably half asleep, his body leaning wherever it could. My mind scolded me, told me not to get carried away. But my heart was already racing, already weaving stories about who he was, why he sat next to me, whether he knew what he was doing. Minutes passed. Stops came and went. The weight of him remained. I didn't dare move. It wasn't just that I was afraid to break the contact. It was that I was afraid of what it meant to want it so badly. Because the truth is, I've spent most of my life learning how to hide. How to look without looking. How to want without wanting too loudly. To exist in silence. To guard myself against the danger of being seen. Growing up, the idea of brushing shoulders with another boy wasn't just about attraction, it was about risk. The wrong move, the wrong glance could unravel everything. And yet, here I was years later, grown but still carrying that same ache. And his shoulder, resting against mine, felt like something forbidden and holy at once. I tried to steal another glance at him, just to memorize. His jawline sharp in profile. His lashes, dark against his skin as his eyes flicked between the window and his phone. He didn't seem nervous, didn't shift away, didn't apologize. He just stayed. And the strangest thing is, so did I. Maybe that's the part that hurts the most. Looking back, that I let myself believe, even just for those 20 minutes on a city bus, that something so simple could be more than what it was. That maybe the universe was cruel and kind at once, giving me just enough warmth to remind me what I longed for, without giving me permission to actually have it. I still remember the hum of the engine, the stale air of the bus, the muffled laugh of some teenager 2 rows back. And against all that, the silence of his shoulder, his warmth pressing into me like it belonged there. When he finally shifted, just slightly, just enough to stretch, I felt the absence immediately, like cold rushing in after you've left a fire. My skin still remembered him. My body, greedy, already missed it. And then came the panic. What if he'd noticed me noticing? What if he thought I was weird for not moving away? What if it was all just a coincidence and I'd turned it into something it wasn't? I sat there, staring out the window, trying to steady my breath. The city blurred past, and all I could see was him. There's a kind of loneliness that doesn't come from being alone. It comes from being next to someone, feeling something, and knowing you'll probably never get the chance to say it out loud. That was the kind of loneliness pressing into me that morning. The bus slowed. Another stop. The doors hissed open. He shifted again, and for a second, I thought he might look at me. That maybe there'd be some sign, some acknowledgement of the connection I'd built up in my mind. But he didn't. He just stood, slung his bag over his shoulder, and stepped off into the morning air. And just like that, he was gone. I sat there, frozen, the imprint of him still on my skin, my chest hollow and heavy all at once. And I wondered, would he remember me too? Would he recall the morning bus, the stranger whose shoulder he'd rested against? Or would I fade, just another unnoticed presence in the blur of his day? For me, it would linger, long after the bus pulled away, long after I got to work, long after the noise of life swallowed me up again. That morning, that shoulder became something I carried. Because sometimes it's not the grand love stories that haunt us. It's the fleeting ones. The ones we can't name, can't hold, can't explain. Just a shoulder, just a brush of warmth. Enough to remind us that we're alive. Enough to break our hearts with the possibility of what could have been. And so I sat there, staring out the window, the city passing by, with one thought echoing in my chest. Why did it feel like more? The rest of that day blurred. I sat through meetings, nodded when I was supposed to, even laughed once or twice at something someone said. But inside, my mind was still on that bus. On him. On the way such a simple thing, just a shoulder, had shaken me more than anything in months. I told myself it was nothing, that I was being ridiculous, that people bump into each other all the time. But the truth was, I hadn't felt that way in so long, like I was suddenly awake inside my own body. And the more I tried to push it away, the more it clung to me. By the time evening rolled around, I found myself walking toward the same bus stop, heart pounding in a way that made no sense. Was I hoping? Expecting? What were the chances he'd be there again at the exact same time, catching the same route? The sky was dimming, painted in pink and orange streaks. The crowd gathered, and then I saw him. Same messy hair, same careless posture, same too-tall frame trying to make itself small in the press of people waiting. My heart stumbled. I wanted to look away, but I couldn't. He was right there, close enough that I could see the crease of exhaustion around his eyes, the way his hand fidgeted with the strap of his backpack. The bus pulled up. We boarded in a shuffle of elbows and bags. He didn't look at me, didn't even seem to notice me. But somehow, in the chaos of strangers, we ended up side by side again. And again it happened. That quiet lean, his shoulder against mine. This time, I knew it wasn't just the jolts of the bus. It was intentional. Subtle but intentional. I swallowed hard. My palms slicked with sweat. My mind screamed 1,000 warnings. Don't move. Don't ruin it. Don't let him know how much it means to you. But my heart, my traitorous heart, ached to lean back, to close that space completely, to let him know I felt it too. So I did. Just slightly. Just enough that my body softened into his, as though it were the most natural thing in the world. And for a few stops we sat like that, silent, connected. The strange, how intimacy doesn't always need words. How sometimes, just existing next to someone, just breathing the same air, can feel louder than any declaration. I wanted to say something, anything. Ask his name, his day, whether he always took this bus. But the words tangled in my throat. I was terrified. Terrified of breaking the fragile thing between us. Terrified of stepping outside the safety of silence and finding out it was all in my head. So I said nothing. And when his stop came, he rose again. No glance, no goodbye. Just gone. But this time, I noticed something, a hesitation. A slight pause before he stepped down. Like maybe he was waiting. Like maybe he wanted me to speak first. I didn't. I spent the night replaying it over and over, torturing myself with what-ifs. What if I'd said hi? What if I'd asked? What if I'd been brave enough to risk it? But bravery has never come easily to me. Not when it comes to men. Because every time I've let myself feel, I've been reminded how dangerous it can be. How quickly vulnerability can turn into rejection. How even the softest desires can be met with ridicule or worse. So instead, I cling to the safe kind of love. The imaginary kind. The fleeting glances, the almost touches, the moments that never demand more than silence. But the thing about silence is it doesn't last. The next morning, I boarded the bus again. My stomach was in knots. Would he be there? Would he remember? Would he even want to sit beside me again? And then I saw him. This time he noticed me. Just briefly, just enough that our eyes met. A flicker of something passed between us. Recognition, acknowledgement, maybe even relief. And when he slid into the seat beside me, his shoulder brushed mine almost immediately.
No hesitaste.
My chest burned. I wanted to laugh at myself. 3 mornings in a row, and I was acting like it was destiny. Like the universe had finally handed me something good. But isn't that how longing works? It makes us desperate to believe in signs, to cling to patterns, to turn coincidence into fate. This time I dared a little more. I let my arm relax, close enough that the back of my hand touched his. Barely, just a whisper of skin. And he didn't move away. God, the rush of it. The way something so small could flood me with heat, with hope. It was like my entire body lit up from the inside. All because he let our hands rest close enough to touch. Stop after stop, we stayed like that. Quiet, breathing, connected. I wanted to believe it meant something. That it wasn't just me, spinning stories in my head. That he felt it too. But as his stop approached, the panic set in again. He would leave, and I would sit here, aching, wondering, regretting. Unless I said something. The bus slowed. He shifted, preparing to stand. My heart hammered. And in a voice so small I barely recognized it as my own, I whispered, "Hey!" He froze, turned just slightly. Our eyes met again. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The bus hissed, the doors opened, people shuffled out. And then he smiled. Small, almost shy. But it was enough. "Hey!" he said back. And then he was gone. The doors closed. The bus pulled away. My heart was still racing. My hand still tingled where it had touched his. It wasn't much. Just a word. Just a smile. But it cracked something open in me. Because sometimes, that's how it begins. Not with grand gestures or sweeping declarations, but with a shoulder on a bus, a shared silence, a single hey. And I couldn't stop wondering, what if this was the start of something more? The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual. I told myself it was just coincidence, that I wasn't doing it for him. But the truth? I was already hoping I'd see him again. Hoping that, hey, wasn't the last thread between us. I stood at the bus stop with my heart in my throat. People gathered around me. An old woman with her shopping bags, a couple arguing softly under their breath, a teenager scrolling endlessly on his phone. But none of them mattered. I was scanning for him, and then there he was. Same messy hair, but damp this time like he just showered. Same backpack slung over one shoulder. His eyes found mine almost instantly, and God, he smiled. It wasn't big, not dazzling. Just a quiet acknowledgement. But after days of pretending I didn't exist, it was everything. We boarded. He slid into the seat beside me without hesitation. Like it was his spot. Like I was his spot. And I couldn't help it. I smiled back. We didn't speak at first. The bus jolted forward. The city hummed around us. And the silence stretched in that comfortable, dangerous way. His shoulder brushed mine again. Not tentative anymore, but steady.
Familiar.
Finally, he said, "You always take this bus?" His voice was low, rough in the morning. I felt it more than I heard it. "Yeah," I managed. "Most days." He nodded. "Me too." And just like that, something ordinary became extraordinary. Conversation. Small, simple words, but words nonetheless. We talked about the bus route, about how unreliable it could be, about the way the seats always seemed too small for anyone taller than 5'8". His laugh. It was soft, but it cracked through me like sunlight. I learned his name, Alex. Alex. It sat on my tongue like something sacred. I said it back to him once, just to feel it leave my mouth. He smiled when I did. And though the ride wasn't long, by the time his stop came, I knew I was in trouble. Because I already wanted more. When he stood, he hesitated again. Looked at me like he wanted to say something. His lips parted, but no words came out. Instead, He gave me that small, shy smile again, and then he was gone. I sat there, stunned. I kept replaying it. His voice, his laugh, the way he said my name when I finally offered it. It was like I'd been starving without even realizing it. And he'd given me the smallest taste of something nourishing. The next day, it was easier. We found each other immediately, sat together without question. And we really talked, about music, about where we grew up, about how much we both hated early mornings. It was nothing and everything all at once. The bus became our place. Day after day, morning after morning, we carved out a routine. 30 minutes of closeness, of laughter, of brushing shoulders and letting our hands linger just a little too close on the shared seat. I started looking forward to mornings in a way I never had before. I started dressing better, paying more attention, not because I thought he expected it, but because I wanted to, because being beside him made me want to be more alive. And yet, there was always a line. Neither of us crossed it. We didn't touch more than shoulders and the occasional graze of hands. We didn't say anything that admitted what it felt like. We stayed in that liminal space, that almost place, where possibility lived but never quite bloomed. It was intoxicating, and it was torture, because every time he laughed, every time his knee knocked against mine, every time his eyes lingered just a little too long, I wanted more. But I didn't know if he wanted it too. One morning, the bus was more crowded than usual. We were squeezed tighter than ever, pressed thigh to thigh, shoulder to shoulder. I could feel the warmth of him everywhere, his breath so close to my ear when he leaned in to make a joke. And then, without warning, his hand slid against mine on the seat. Not accidental. Not this time. I froze. My heart slammed. He didn't look at me, didn't say a word, just let his hand rest there, brushing mine, waiting. The world narrowed to that point of contact. Every nerve in my body screamed at me to do something, to take it, to hold it, to claim the moment. So I did. I turned my hand, just slightly, just enough to let my fingers lace with his. And God, he squeezed back. It was small. It was hidden. No one else on that bus would have noticed. But to me, it was everything. It was a confession, promise, a spark that lit my entire chest on fire. We rode like that, hands hidden, hearts exposed, until his stop came. When he stood, he didn't let go right away. He gave my hand one last squeeze, and then, finally, our eyes met. There was no mistaking it now. This wasn't just coincidence. This wasn't just imagination. This was real. And as he stepped off the bus, disappearing into the blur of the morning, I sat there with my hands still tingling, my body still shaking, my heart still whispering the truth I'd been too afraid to name. I wanted him, and for the first time I let myself believe maybe he wanted me too. The following week felt like a dream I was terrified of waking from. Every morning, Alex and I found each other on the bus. Sometimes we talked, sometimes we didn't, but the silence wasn't empty anymore. It was thick with knowing. And sometimes, when the crowd pressed us close enough, our hands would find each other. Hidden.
Tentative.
Alive. It was dangerous in its own quiet way. The world outside our little bubble still existed. A world that judged, that punished, that demanded masks we'd both learned to wear too well. So we never spoke of it outright. Never said this is who we are, this is what we're doing. We just let it be. But inside, I was unraveling. I'd lie awake at night replaying every brush of his fingers, every smile, every laugh. I memorized the way he said my name. I thought about him in the shower, on my lunch breaks, while I stared at my computer pretending to work. And still, I was terrified, because longing is safe when it stays unspoken. Once you name it, it becomes something fragile that can break. And I didn't know if I could survive the shattering. One morning, rain poured down in sheets, drenching everyone at the stop. I saw him through the blur of umbrellas, hair plastered to his forehead, his jacket clinging to him. When he spotted me, he laughed. Actually laughed like the storm was some private joke we shared. We squeezed into the crowded bus, dripping wet, water pooling at our feet. And maybe it was the storm, or the way my heart had been aching for days, but something in me snapped. When the bus lurched forward, I let my knee press against his. harder than usual. Not subtle this time. He looked at me, really looked at me. His eyes, God. I'll never forget the way they softened, the way they searched mine as though he was waiting for permission. And before I could lose my courage, I whispered, "Do you want to get off with me? Just one stop early." My throat went dry the second I said it. My pulse thundered in my ears. For a moment, I thought he might laugh, or worse, pull away. But instead, he nodded. The bus rolled on, stop after stop. My chest felt like it would explode. When the bell dinged, we both stood. Together. The doors hissed open, and we stepped into the rain. It soaked us instantly, plastering our clothes to our skin. The street was nearly empty, just the hiss of tires on wet asphalt, the smell of rain on concrete. We walked in silence for a few steps, unsure, the weight of what we'd just done pressing down on us. And then he stopped. I turned, heart pounding, rain dripping into my eyes. He was standing there, chest rising and falling, hair dripping. His lips parted like he wanted to say something, but no words came. So I stepped closer. For a second, the world held its breath. And then his hand reached for mine. No hiding this time, no bus seat to shield us. Just his fingers threading through mine, out in the open, rain pouring over us. I swear I could have cried, because in that moment it didn't matter who saw. It didn't matter what came next. It was just us, and the storm, and the truth that had been waiting between us for days. We didn't kiss, not yet. Maybe we were both too scared, or maybe we knew that once we crossed that line, nothing would ever be the same. But we stood there, in the rain, holding hands like it was the only thing keeping us upright. And for me it was. The next day, everything felt different. On the bus, our silences were charged with something new. Every glance lingered. Every touch burned hotter. I felt like I was walking a tightrope, terrified and exhilarated at once. We started texting. Little things at first. Memes, complaints about the bus being late, updates about our days. But late at night, the texts stretched longer, deeper. We talked about fears, about dreams, about the parts of ourselves we rarely showed anyone. I learned that Alex hated his job, that he'd always wanted to move to another city but never found the nerve, that he played guitar but hadn't touched it in years. And slowly, he learned me too. The bus became our anchor, but outside of it, we were building something real, something fragile and terrifying, but real. And yet, there was always a shadow, because we still hadn't said it, hadn't named what this was. I told myself I was okay with that the holding hands, the stolen moments, the late-night texts were enough. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. I wanted more. I wanted him. One night, lying in bed with the glow of my phone lighting up my face, I almost typed it out. I like you. Simple. Honest.
Bora.
But my fingers froze over the screen. Couldn't. Not yet. Because what if I was wrong? What if, to him, this was just companionship? Just a closeness he didn't know how to name, but nothing more? So I deleted the words, sent a joke instead, and rolled over into the emptiness of my sheets. But even in the ache of holding back, I knew the truth. This wasn't nothing. This wasn't an accident. This was the beginning of something that could either save me or break me completely. And I didn't know which one I was more afraid of. I think back now, and it feels like that stretch of days existed in some separate universe. A world carved out just for us. 30 minutes in the morning, sometimes 30 more at night, where the rest of life couldn't intrude. We laughed, we leaned, we lingered, and every time our fingers brushed and stayed, I felt myself slipping further. But love, if that's what it was starting to feel like, has a way of demanding more. It happened one evening. The bus was nearly empty, just a handful of tired commuters staring out windows, lost in their own worlds. Alex and I sat in our usual spot, close enough that I could feel the heat radiating off him. We talked about nothing at all, how the city smelled different in the fall, how he'd once broken his wrist trying to skateboard, how much he hated instant coffee. I watched his mouth move, the way his lips curled when he smiled, and I realized, God, I wanted to kiss him. The realization terrified me, because wanting is dangerous. Wanting crosses lines. I forced my eyes away, stared at the blur of neon lights outside, tried to will the thought away. But it only grew louder. And then, as if he could hear it, Alex shifted. His knee pressed against mine harder than usual. His hand slid closer on the seat between us. His breath slowed. The space filled with tension so thick I could barely breathe. Finally, he whispered, "Can I ask you something?" His voice was soft, like he wasn't sure it would hold. "Yeah," I said, though my throat was tight. He hesitated, looked down, looked back up. "Do you ever feel like we're pretending not to notice what this is?" The words knocked the air out of me. I wanted to laugh, to cry, to shout yes. Instead, I just nodded, because if I opened my mouth, everything inside me would come spilling out. He exhaled, like he'd been holding his breath for weeks. His fingers inched toward mine, not hidden this time, not shy, just reaching. I met him halfway, and when our hands locked together, it was like stepping off a cliff and finding wings. For a while, we just sat there. No words, no need. His thumb brushed across my knuckles, slow and steady, and I wanted to freeze time, to live forever in that single gesture. But the bus kept moving. Stops kept coming. And soon it was his turn to leave. When he stood, he didn't let go right away. He looked at me, eyes shining in a way I hadn't seen before, like he was holding back a storm. And then, so quietly I almost missed it, he said, "Come with me." The doors opened. The night air rushed in. I followed. We walked side by side down a dim street, our hands brushing but not quite holding this time. The city felt different, quieter, more fragile, like it was watching us. He stopped outside a small cafe, long closed for the night. The streetlights painted him in gold, rain still glistening on the pavement. "I don't really do this," he said. His voice cracked on the words. "I don't usually let people in." I swallowed hard. Me neither. For a moment we just stood there, the weight of everything unsaid pressing down. And then, almost imperceptibly, he leaned closer. My chest was on fire. Every instinct screamed at me to close the gap, to take what I'd been craving. But fear, always fear, kept me still. So he did it for me. His lips brushed mine. Just barely, just a whisper of a kiss. But it shattered me. I gasped against him, my hands trembling as I reached for his jacket. He pressed closer, surer this time, his mouth soft and hungry against mine. The world disappeared. There was no bus, no city, no strangers, no shadows. Just Alex, just us. When we finally pulled apart, I was shaking. He looked at me with an expression I couldn't name, something between wonder and terror. "I've wanted to do that since the first day," he whispered. I laughed, breathless. "So have I." We didn't linger long. The street was too open, too exposed. But we walked together the rest of the way to his stop, shoulders brushing, the ghost of his kiss still burning on my lips. That night I couldn't sleep. I replayed it over and over, touching my mouth like I could summon him back with the memory. I wanted more. God, I wanted everything. And for the first time, I believed I might get it. But here's the thing about beginnings. They're fragile. They burn bright, but they can also burn out. And deep down, I knew this wasn't just a story of two men on a bus finding love. It was also a story of fear, of timing, of the ways life can twist even the sweetest moments into something complicated. Because love, real love, doesn't happen in a vacuum. It collides with our pasts, our secrets, our scars. And soon I would learn just how heavy those could be. But in that moment, standing under the glow of streetlights, lips still tingling, heart still raw, I let myself believe. For once, I let myself have hope. Hope is a dangerous thing. It makes you softer, braver, hungrier. It makes you believe in futures you've never dared to picture before. And that's what Alex was doing to me, reshaping the way I saw the days ahead. The bus rides stopped being enough. Not because I didn't cherish them, I did. God, I lived for them. But once you've kissed someone, once you've felt the press of their lips and the weight of their wanting, 30 minutes in a crowded bus isn't enough anymore. It was Alex who suggested it. "Come over," he said one morning, his voice low enough that only I could hear. "After work, I'll cook. I froze, my heart slamming against my ribs. This was more than holding hands in secret, more than a kiss under streetlights. This was stepping into each other's lives, letting the private worlds bleed into one another. I nodded, pretending to be casual. Inside, I was on fire. That evening, I walked the few blocks from my stop to his apartment, every step heavier with nerves. I almost turned back twice. But when I reached his building and he opened the door, smiling in that soft, unsure way, I knew I couldn't have stayed away if I tried. His apartment was small, lived in. Dishes drying in the rack, books stacked in messy piles, a guitar leaning against the wall like a forgotten memory. It smelled like him, coffee, laundry soap, something warm I couldn't name. I don't usually have people over, he admitted, rubbing the back of his neck. Looks perfect to me, I said, and I meant it. He cooked pasta, burning the garlic just enough that we both laughed when the smoke alarm chirped. We drank cheap wine out of mismatched glasses. Felt easy, like maybe we'd been doing this for years. But underneath the laughter, the tension hummed. Every glance lingered. Every brush of hands at the table left me breathless. When the plates were pushed aside, when the wine was nearly gone, the silence stretched thick. And then he kissed me again. This time it wasn't tentative. It wasn't shy. It was hungry. I let him pull me onto the couch, my hands finding his face, his hair, anything to keep him close. His breath was hot against my skin, his fingers desperate at my waist. It wasn't just lust. It was release. Weeks of holding back, weeks of longing, finally spilling out all at once. When we pulled apart, gasping, he pressed his forehead to mine. I don't know what this is, he whispered, but I want it. My throat tightened. I wanted to tell him I wanted it too, that I'd wanted it since the first time his shoulder rested against mine on that bus, that I was terrified, but I'd never been more certain of anything. But the words got stuck as they always did. So I just nodded, hoping he could feel the truth of it in the way I held him. That night I didn't stay. Neither of us was ready for that yet. But when I walked home, the city buzzing around me, my lips swollen from his kiss, my heart felt like it was finally beating in rhythm with the world. For weeks we lived in that glow. Bus rides, dinners, stolen kisses in stairwells, late-night texts that stretched until dawn. It was reckless and tender all at once, like balancing on the edge of something beautiful and dangerous. And for the first time in years, I let myself imagine a future. But then the cracks began to show. Started small. A shadow in his smile, a hesitation in his laugh. The way his phone would buzz late at night and he'd go quiet. I tried not to notice. Tried to bury it beneath the warmth of his hand in mine. The way he said my name like it mattered. But I've learned that when you've lived with fear long enough, you can always sense when something's about to break. One night, we were lying on his couch, tangled in blankets, the hum of the city outside his window. His phone buzzed again. He froze. I asked, softly, "Everything okay?" He hesitated just a moment too long. Then he forced a smile. "Yeah, just work stuff." But his eyes betrayed him. I didn't push. I wanted to, but I didn't, because I was scared. Scared of shattering the fragile world we'd built. Scared of finding out that maybe it wasn't as simple as I wanted it to be. So I kissed him instead. Let his mouth silence my questions. But the unease lingered, and the more I tried to hold on to him, the more I felt him slipping. I told myself I was imagining it, that my own insecurities were twisting things, that if I just stayed quiet, stayed steady, it would be fine. But deep down, I knew. The same way I knew the first time his shoulder touched mine. That tiny, ordinary moment could change everything. I knew this too. Something was coming. Something that would test whether what we had was real enough to survive. And I was terrified that it wasn't. The first real crack came on a Thursday morning. The bus was more crowded than usual. Bodies pressed together, voices buzzing over the engine's growl. I found Alex quickly, our unspoken ritual, and slid into the seat beside him. But something was off. He didn't smile, didn't lean. His shoulder stayed firmly against the aisle side, leaving a gulf of space between us that no one else would have noticed. But I did. I tried to brush it off. Maybe he was tired. Maybe he'd had a bad night. But the silence between us felt sharper than usual, like it had edges. Finally, I whispered, "You okay?" He nodded too quickly. "Yeah, fine." But his eyes stayed glued to the window, and I knew he was lying. That evening I texted him, "You seemed off this morning. Want to talk?" Hours passed before he responded. "Just busy. Sorry." 2 words that were meant to soothe, but they only deepened the pit in my stomach. The days that followed were a push and pull. Some mornings he was his old self, laughing, teasing, letting our hands brush. Other mornings he was distant, folded into himself, unreachable. And I was unraveling, because when you've built your hope on someone, even the smallest shift feels like an earthquake. One night, after too many glasses of wine and too little self-control, I called him. He didn't pick up. My chest tightened. I called again. Still nothing. But then, 5 minutes later, he showed up at my door. Soaked from rain, eyes wild, breath ragged. I froze. "Alex!" Before I could finish, he kissed me. Hard. Desperate. His hands clutched at me like I was the only thing keeping him standing. When he finally pulled back, I whispered, "What's wrong?" He shook his head, pressing his forehead to mine. "I don't want to talk about it. Not tonight." And because I was terrified of losing him, I didn't press. We spent the night tangled together, bodies speaking the words he couldn't. And for a little while it felt like enough. But it wasn't. The truth has a way of clawing its way out, no matter how hard you try to bury it. Weeks later, it finally did. We were sitting in his apartment, takeout cartons spread across the table, laughter fading into comfortable silence. His phone buzzed. He glanced at it, and for once, he didn't hide the flicker of pain in his eyes. I asked, softly, "Who is it?" He hesitated, then sighed, setting the phone face down. "My ex." The words landed like a blow. I tried to stay calm. "Still in touch?" "Not exactly," he said, running a hand through his hair. "He's been reaching out. I've been ignoring it. Mostly." "Mostly?" My chest tightened. He winced. "Sometimes I answer. Not because I want him back, but because, I don't know. It's hard to explain." The air between us thickened. "Alex," I whispered, "are you still in love with him?" His silence was louder than any answer. I felt the floor tilt beneath me. Every bus ride, every laugh, every kiss. They all replayed in my head, suddenly uncertain. "I thought," my voice cracked, "I thought this was real." "It is," he said quickly, grabbing my hand. "It is. You are. But, that word, that dagger. But I'm not good at letting go," he admitted, his voice breaking. "And I don't want to hurt you." I pulled my hand back, staring at the mess of takeout between us. My appetite was gone. My hope, too. The thing about heartbreak is it doesn't come all at once. It seeps in. A word here, a silence there, until suddenly you realize you're drowning. That night, I left his apartment with my chest in pieces. The bus felt different the next morning. We still sat together, still leaned close enough to brush, but the weight of what I knew pressed between us. Every smile felt borrowed, every touch temporary. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe that I was enough to eclipse the ghosts of his past. But the truth was, I could feel the distance growing. And no matter how tightly I held on, he was slipping. Looking back, maybe that's what makes it hurt the most. Not the fact that it ended, but the way it ended, not with a crash, not with a fight, but with a slow, quiet unraveling. Like watching a sunset you don't want to end, knowing the darkness is coming whether you're ready or not. And I wasn't ready. God, I wasn't ready. Because for all the longing and the ache, for all the nights of silence and secrets, I had started to believe in something I hadn't believed in for years. That maybe love, real love, was possible for me. And now, I was watching it slip through my fingers, helpless to stop it. There's a particular kind of ache that comes from pretending. Pretending everything is fine. Pretending you don't notice the way the other person's smile doesn't quite reach their eyes anymore. Pretending the silence between you is comfortable, when really it's suffocating. That was us. The bus rides continued, but they weren't the same. We still sat together, still brushed shoulders, still whispered little nothings. But underneath it all, the truth pulsed like a bruise. I tried to convince myself that love was enough to patch the cracks. That if I held on tightly enough, if I kept showing up, if I poured all of myself into him, maybe, just maybe, he'd forget the ghost that haunted him. But ghosts don't leave just because you want them to. One night, I found myself walking home alone after leaving his apartment. We'd eaten dinner, watched a movie, kissed a little. On the surface, it looked like any other night. But the way he pulled back when I touched his cheek, the way he stared too long at his phone when he thought I wasn't looking, it told me everything. And for the first time, I wondered if I was only a placeholder. That thought destroyed me, because how do you measure yourself against someone's history? How do you compete with a love that still lingers in their bones, even when they swear it's over? Couldn't. And the fear of that truth gnawed at me night after night. The breaking point came on a Sunday. We'd planned to meet up, spend the afternoon wandering the city, maybe grab coffee. I waited at our usual spot, my heart thudding with a mix of hope and dread. Minutes passed, then an hour. I texted. No reply. I called. Straight to voicemail. Finally, just when I was about to give up, my phone buzzed. Sorry, can't today. Something came up. That was it. No explanation. No promise to reschedule. Just a curt message that felt like a door slamming shut. I stood there on the sidewalk, people brushing past me, the city roaring around me, and I felt invisible, small, like the ground had disappeared beneath my feet. That night I didn't sleep. I lay in the dark, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment from the beginning. The first shoulder lean, the first smile, the first kiss in the rain. I clung to them, desperate to prove to myself that I hadn't imagined it, that it had meant something. But memory is cruel. It makes you relive the sweetness while forcing you to taste the bitterness too. By morning, I knew what I had to do. I couldn't keep bleeding myself dry for someone who wasn't sure if they wanted me. I couldn't keep living on crumbs, waiting for him to choose me over someone who wasn't even there anymore. So the next time I saw him on the bus, I gathered every shred of courage I had. Alex, I said quietly, we need to talk. He looked at me, startled, then resigned. Yeah, we do. We got off 2 stops early, just like that rainy morning weeks ago. But this time, instead of holding hands in the storm, we stood apart on the sidewalk, the air heavy between us. I can't, I started, my voice shaking. I can't keep doing this if you're not sure. His eyes dropped to the pavement. I know. The silence stretched. Cars whooshed past, the city moving on without us. Finally, he said, I care about you, more than I thought I would. But I'm not. I'm not ready. I'm still stuck. His voice cracked on the word. And it's not fair to you. I swallowed hard, my chest splintering. Then why start this with me? He looked up, pain in his eyes. Because when I'm with you, I feel like I can breathe again. Like maybe I could move on. But then, when I'm alone, the past comes crashing back. The honesty hurt worse than any lie. I nodded, tears stinging my eyes. I want to be enough for you, Alex. God, I want to. But I can't compete with someone who isn't even here. His lips parted like he wanted to argue. But he didn't, because he knew I was right. So we stood there, 2 men on a sidewalk, the rain threatening to fall again. And we let the silence finish the conversation we couldn't bear to have. Eventually, he whispered, I'm sorry. And I, broken but trying to be brave, said, me too. Then I turned, and I walked away. The bus came and went behind me. The city swallowed me whole. And for the first time since that morning his shoulder had rested against mine, I was alone again. But this time the loneliness was heavier. Because now I knew what it felt like to be wanted, even briefly. And losing him, felt like losing a piece of myself I didn't know I'd given away. For days, I moved through life like a ghost. Work, sleep, repeat. My body went through the motions, but my heart was somewhere else. Stuck on a bus seat, stuck in the rain, stuck in the moments that had felt like beginnings. And yet, beneath the grief, beneath the hollow ache, a quiet truth began to grow. That what I had with Alex, however brief, however broken, was still real. And maybe, just maybe, it wasn't the end of my story. Time has a way of softening things you think will always hurt. Not completely, not the way you wish it would, but it quiets the edges, turns raw, jagged grief into a dull ache you can carry without collapsing. Weeks passed. The bus rides became routine again. I still saw him sometimes, Alex, but we never spoke beyond polite nods, half-smiles. His presence was a shadow, a reminder of something I couldn't hold on to but couldn't forget either. I told myself I was fine, that I was moving on. But the truth is, moving on isn't about forgetting. It's about learning to exist with the absence. Learning that love can leave you richer and emptier at the same time. And somehow, in that ache, I began to understand something important about myself. I spent so long hiding desire, hiding affection, hiding the parts of me that ached for connection. But with Alex, I'd been brave. I'd let myself feel. I'd let myself hope. I'd let myself be vulnerable. And even though it had ended in heartbreak, I was better for it. I started noticing things again. Small things, the way sunlight glinted off wet streets, the smell of coffee in the morning, the sound of a familiar song drifting through an open window. Life itself seemed more vivid because I'd allowed myself to feel it so fully. And then, one morning, something unexpected happened. I boarded the bus, lost in thought as usual, and there he was. Alex, not smiling, not reaching for me, just there. For a moment, panic gripped me. I wasn't ready to face the past. I wasn't ready to confront the memory of what we'd been. But then he looked at me, and something in his expression softened. I nodded. He nodded back. The bus moved on, stop after stop. And for the first time, there was no tension. No longing, no uncertainty, no unspoken words hanging in the air. Just two people, existing in the same space, alive and present. It was a small thing, but it felt like progress. Over the following weeks, we fell into an uneasy rhythm. We talked a little, laughed a little, but never like before. And I realized that maybe this was what healing looked like. Not a dramatic reunion. Not a sweeping love story. Just two people learning to exist together again without the weight of expectation. I still thought about him every day. Still replayed the moments, the kisses, the small intimacies that had left a permanent mark on me. But now, instead of feeling broken, I felt grateful. Grateful that I had loved, that I had been seen, that I had allowed myself to feel something so raw, so fragile, so utterly human. And one morning, as the bus jolted over a pothole and his shoulder brushed mine in that familiar, fleeting way, I smiled. Not because I was longing for him anymore. Not because I wanted what we had back. But because I remembered the way it had felt to be close to someone who made my heart ache. To be brave enough to reach for connection, to risk being seen, to allow myself to hope. That shoulder, resting against mine, was no longer a wound. It was a memory, a lesson, a proof that intimacy, however fleeting, matters. That love, however imperfect, changes us. And in that memory, I found something I hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Hope that even if love doesn't last forever, the courage to feel it does. Hope that even when hearts break, we can still carry pieces of that tenderness with us. Hope that the world is wide enough to allow for new beginnings, new connections, new chances. Because sometimes, love isn't about possession. It isn't about forever. It's about showing up. It's about leaning in. It's about letting someone touch your life in ways that leave an imprint.